And welcome back to part 2 of Witchtok No Nuance November. If you haven't seen part 1, go check that one out and come back to this. There's just a couple more videos that I wanted to get through, but the last one got kind of long, and so I wanted to make them into separate parts and not make it like an hour-long video because I talk a lot. So let's just get into it. This is more reactions.
No Nuance November takes, let's do this shit again. 99% of the time when I see witches on here talk about their third eye chakra, they have no context for the Hindu system of chakras. What they are talking about is the Western understanding of psychic ability. Sometimes you don't know if you're worshiping with or working with a deity. That's okay because deity work is not the same for anyone. You are supposed to have an individual experience. It's supposed to be confusing. Also, we have misconstrued deity work on this app so that most people go into it thinking they're going to get a mentor for witchcraft who's going to hand them stuff so they don't have to figure out their own path. That is not what deity work is, usually. Older witches on this app love to pose as mentors but do not understand that being a mentor is also learning from those you're mentoring. Beginner witches still have smart things to teach you. Let them teach you too.
Again, love it. Let's go part by part, like we did, alright?
No Nuance November takes, let's do this shit again. 99% of the time when I see witches on here talk about their third eye chakra, they have no context for the Hindu system of chakras. What they are talking about is the Western understanding of psychic ability.
Cultural context in most things in witchcraft is very important. It's the reason we have correspondences for herbs and colors and plants in general and trees and bones and everything else. There is a cultural understanding as to why those reasonings came to be. And it's different based on your region because different plants were used for different things. If you are in a specific practice like Norse paganism, my understanding of what smoke cleansing is going to be very different than somebody who is native coming from California, because white sage does not grow in Scandinavia. We would use more like juniper, cedar, pine. Totally different understandings of a similar practice. It's the same thing with chakras. You know, you've got your energy centers, but there's a lot deeper understanding of blockages and all sorts of things, which I won't speak on because that's not even close to my realm. But a lot of like new age witch shops show a lot of things like, here is all of your chakras. They're not aligned. This is why you're having this issue, without realizing all of the things that go into that. So if that is your shtick and you're looking to get into that and that interests you, look into the cultural context and see how they have evolved over time. That's important. Those would be good things to start with. Next section.
Sometimes you don't know if you're worshiping with or working with a deity. That's okay because deity work is not the same for anyone. You are supposed to have an individual experience. It's supposed to be confusing.
The reason we have UPGs, which is unverified personal gnosis, is that you're supposed to have unique experiences. What one person says that their deity likes might be totally different than what somebody else says the same deity likes, because they have personal relationships and interactions. The experiences you have with your deity will be different than anyone else's. It might be similar in some regards, but it will never be the same. And so this is why you take notes with your interactions. This is why you take notes about everything, because then you can go back and be like, yes, they liked, like Freya, she likes red carnations. Cool. Thor really prefers stouts versus IPAs. Odin likes flavored tobacco. Doesn't really like cigarettes. Stuff. Things. These are important. This is part of growing a relationship with a deity. Have your own relationship. You don't have to share it with anyone. That's fine.
Also, we have misconstrued deity work on this app so that most people go into it thinking they're going to get a mentor for witchcraft who's going to hand them stuff so they don't have to figure out their own path. That is not what deity work is, usually.
Usually. There are, of course, going to be certain deities that come into your life because they're like, you gotta fucking learn this, and apparently you're too thick-skulled or not paying attention enough to understand this, so here's a bunch of shit. Boom. But in most instances, deity work, you are trying to learn from them what they are willing to give, and they are willing to stand behind you as that you do the things yourself. Not the same for everyone, but in my own personal experience, if I'm trying to do something and I just kind of want to have somebody watch over my shoulder as I'm doing something, call upon my deities. If they show up, awesome. If they don't feel like it that time, that's fine too, because I know that we don't have a relationship that is super codependent, because it's like, I got shit to do, they got shit to do, it's not a big deal. If they feel like coming around, I'm grateful for it, but you shouldn't expect your deity to do all the work for you, or to hand you things, or to come when they are called. You can ask nicely and make offerings and be like, hey, I could really use your help right now, or could you just kind of give me a direction to go? That would be helpful. And maybe they'll be like, yeah, I got you. Or, no, you gotta figure this out on your own. It's important that you figure this out on your own. Deities understand the larger scale of the world or worlds, how they interact with everything, how species interact with each other, and just understand the grand scheme of things way better than we ever will be able to conceive. So trust your deities enough to let them give you what they are willing to give, and then be grateful for it. And don't call on your deities like they're supposed to come running like dogs. It's disrespectful and gross.
Older witches on this app love to pose as mentors, but do not understand that being a mentor is also learning from those you're mentoring. Beginner witches still have smart things to teach you. Let them teach you too.
A great note to end on that video, because the frustration when you talk to older witches and you're like, hey, you know, I learned this, is this similar? And you try having a discussion or a dialogue of some kind, and they shut you down, not willing to hear it. Because if your practice is different than mine, and I can get a broader perspective, understanding why you do things the way you do, which is one of my favorite topics to talk about, that would benefit both of us, because we would broaden our horizons, understand the world better. Things are great. Knowledge is power. If you get to a certain age and you're like, I know everything, it's the genius complex. I have done the work. I've been doing this for long enough. Everything I do is correct. Nothing I can do could change, blah, blah, blah. What's the point of that? Witchcraft is supposed to be acquiring knowledge. If you're not willing to let others teach you, whether young or old, what's the fucking point? Yeah, you might understand the most efficient way to do something, but somebody else came up with a more creative way of doing something. A more nuanced way to do something. Just a different way of doing something. And it'd be cool to learn about that, because there's always something else to learn. Just allow yourself to be open-minded. It makes everything way more interesting. Alright, I'll step off my soapbox. Next video!
Welcome to No Nuance November, Witchtok edition. I will not be debating. I will not be arguing in the comments. Moonwater is not that cool. It's not. It's not that hard to use a different type of sage other than white sage. You just have a colonizer mindset. You cannot substitute rosemary for every other herb. It is not a universal replacement. Catholicism is just mysticism within an organized religion. And the reason that it rejected paganism and witchcraft is so hard is because it wanted to have power over people. There's a difference between doing chaos magic, which has an actual, specific set structure, and being chaotic and just throwing things together. Jar spells only work in certain situations.
Again, we love Frankie. I don't know how that video happened. That was one of them that came up on my For You page, and I'm like, cool, save it. And now I'm looking at the date. It's from 2020, but still in November, so it's fine. Everything's fine. But we're gonna go through piece by piece, because lots of good things.
To No Nuance November, Witchtok edition. I will not be debating. I will not be arguing in the comments. Moonwater is not that cool.
Some people are not into Moonwater, and that's perfectly fine. Moon water is seen as a really easy beginner thing to do because, yeah, you just chuck water outside. You can throw a bottle outside, a glass, whatever. Cool, energy. Bam. Energized water. Great. And if you have a elemental domain like I do, which is water, you're more connected to different kinds of water. So river water will be different than lake water, which is different than storm water, which is different than moon water, which is different than eclipse water. Different things work for different things. So if you use water a lot, moon water is great. I love moon water, but it's not everyone's thing, and that's totally fine. Your practice is your own. What is important to you is important to you. But you don't have to follow everyone else because it's the trend.
It's not. It's not that hard to use a different type of sage other than white sage. You just have a colonizer mindset.
There are so many types of sage that grow in every region. Like if you live in the Pacific Northwest versus, the deep south, there's sage that grows. It's just going to be different, like blue sage, clary sage, you have white sage. There are different types, and everyone's like, well, how am I supposed to cleanse my house? If you don't know alternatives to white sage for cleansing, doing the research is where you should start. Not arguing with native people. Okay, cool? Okay, cool. Next.
You cannot substitute rosemary for every other herb. It is not a universal replacement.
Rosemary has a time and place, and it can replace a lot of things. Totally fine. But certain situations require something else. Use the appropriate tools.
Catholicism is just mysticism within an organized religion, and the reason that it rejected paganism and witchcraft is so hard is because it wanted to have power over people.
We've talked about it before, we'll talk about it again. Especially Catholicism, super witchy, super occult. You're ritualistically in a large group of people, consuming the symbolic body and blood of your demigod. You have devotional candles in the back of the church, which you light for someone's soul, someone who is sick. They're prayer candles. The priest, or priestess, in some instances, goes up and uses incense and anoints the crowd. In some instances, they anoint the crowd with holy water. It's so witchy. And in some instances, they still do services and sermons in Latin. It's so witchy. And so I don't understand why everyone's like, there can't be Christian witches. Dramatic sleeves for enunciation. The thing I have with organized religion is that organized religion requires power of someone who is placed in power, usually a priest. They don't really have priestesses, but priestesses, pastors. You have a person, and there is a hierarchy of power up until like the Pope if you're Catholic. Power structures do not like being challenged, and so witchcraft and paganism is very focused on individualism, individual goals, individual needs, individual desires. You can't just count on blind faith in witchcraft. There is methodology to whatever your practice is. There are steps and reasoning and interpretations that can be muddied. In organized religion, it is set, there are rules, and if you question them in a lot of instances, you are told to just have blind faith. They aren't entirely oil and water, but there is a lot of tension between the two. So if you can find a good balance between the two, Christianity is very witchy, but you have to find it in an accepting sect of Christianity, if that makes sense.
There's a difference between doing chaos magic, which has an actual specific set structure, and being chaotic and just throwing things together.
I'm a very chaotic person, so I throw a lot of my spells together. Like, there's a plan, because my brain's like, okay, this is good for this, and this is good for that. If we put this with that, that'll be fine. And then we'll do this, and then that'll work out this way. So I kind of run through it with just the knowledge that I have. And of course, I'll check my stuff being like, is that really? Yeah, that's fine, cool. But chaos magic is fascinating. Some people I know, we're not going to even specify who they are to me, are chaos practitioners, and some of my friends are chaos practitioners. It's very interesting. I find it fascinating, and it's probably something that I'll look into more because I find it so interesting. It's just using the structures in the chaos that are already set to move things into your favor. So it's not the chaos of the universe, because I was having this discussion with Kat the other day. It's not that everything is chaos, it is that you can make sense of the chaos along with the set structures that already exist. So there is a rhyme and reason to it, and it's very interesting. I definitely recommend chaos magic just as a pastime of looking into, because I think it's really cool. Anyway.
Jar spells only work in certain situations.
Yeah. There are times that sachets make more sense. There are times that candle spells make more sense. Jars are a container to hold things, to keep things together, to keep things coalesced or bound or whatnot, to be undisturbed. In a lot of instances, it's hard to use a jar spell for things that could go awry. If it's something that you want to set and forget, or something you want to set and then maybe come back to way later to check on, or occasionally check on, great. But a lot of instances, you want to do a spell and then let the energy go into the world and do its thing, and then you want to get rid of what you have done because the remnants would still hold it here instead of letting it go. There's a time and a place for everything.
Witches on TikTok always try to talk about all these important skills you need to learn how to do to be a witch, but nobody ever talks about the one really important one. You need to learn how to pee in a jar.
Oh, the best. I was talking about this, I believe, in part 1, but bodily fluids are very powerful. Very powerful. They're a good tag lock. They help to keep your energy in with the spell. And so if you're afraid of being gross, you won't be able to do a lot of more advanced magic. Parts of yourself are very powerful, and they tether you to the spell. So, yeah, know how to pee in a jar. It'll take you places.
No Nuance November. Witchcraft edition. I don't give a single fuck if it's your practice or you practice differently. If your practice is bullshit, it's bullshit. I don't know what you want me to tell you. There is so much misinformation on this app because people are too afraid to call other people out. Or else they look mean, or they're not respectful of other people's craft. Oh, boo fucking who! There are right and wrong ways to cast magic. But so many people on this app want to act like they're in fantasy land and act like all of their spells work 100% of the time because of their intent. And if you haven't caught on by now, that's not how magic works. I'm not just trying to be a dick. I just want to make sure that new practitioners learn about real witchcraft.
So, lots of things. There's so much shit on Witchtok specifically that's just like straight trash. And people who are cosplaying as witches who aren't actually doing the work and then project themselves as I am powerful and you should bow down to me or you should do my spells because they are powerful. And it's like, what? No. It's doing a disservice to new practitioners if we pretend that doing whatever you want, attention is everything, it'll work out just the way you said, is how this works. There is a method to the madness, but you have to follow certain rules in order to get anywhere. You can't just write on a piece of paper 3 times, I really want this car. whatever kind of card it is, and then you fold it and you put it under your pillow, and intention is everything, I'm gonna get that card. You have to do the work behind it too. It's the same thing as the reason I got so mad at Witchtok Boy, because it's like, there are ways to do anything, but if you're not specific enough, if your heart isn't in the right place in the moment, if you're distracted, if your intentions are for malice, but you're not doing malicious work, energies get crossed, things get confused, things might be thrown back at you, you might hit something like a barrier, you might hit wards. We're doing a disservice to the next generation that's coming up because people are cosplaying and pretending that you don't have to do any actual work. It'll just work out for you, and everything happens for a reason all the time. Not always. And we need to be honest about that. Sometimes things just suck. It's the same thing I have an issue when people are like, somebody cursed me, everything's a curse, everything's a hex, oh my god. It's like, sometimes it's just you made a bad decision, and these are the consequences of your actions. It's not somebody threw something at you. You're just stupid. Anyway.
No Nuance November takes that will most certainly get me cancelled. Policing people on cultural appropriation is borderline useless if we're not also having conversations about white entitlement. Way too many people on Witchtok and spiritual TikTok are too busy virtue signaling to actually have a developed thought. The terms white magic and black magic are rooted in racism. Same thing with using the term low magic to describe folk practices. Witchtok and spiritual talk have a really bad habit of pushing people of a certain culture out of conversations that are about their own culture. Cycling through the same 5 debates on Witchtok every couple of months is fucking exhausting. For the love of God, find a new controversy. Having Christianized morals in your spiritual practice does not make you better than everyone else. We will talk about decolonizing our practices all day long, but when it comes to removing anti-Semitism from our practices, radio silence. Satanic panic does not exclusively exist outside of occult spaces. That is all. No new.
Hot takes to end on. Let's get into this shit.
No Nuance November takes that will most certainly get me cancelled. Policing people on cultural appropriation is borderline useless if we're not also having conversations about white entitlement.
No one is entitled to anyone else's practice. If they are willing to share with you, accept it graciously and gratefully. But this is the problem, is when people are in my comments demanding things from me, when people are in my friends' comments demanding things from them, whether that be knowledge, spells, affirmations, what have you, it is almost certainly a white person. And if you even respectfully be like, do your own research, look it up, not gonna do it for you, the outrage is visceral and honestly just so annoying. It's the same reason that a lot of my native friends have people in their comments who are like, well, I can use white sage because fill in the blank, or I should be able to use it, when it's just, you're asking respectfully, hey, we're asking for like one thing really, that would be great. And it's just take. When a large group of people is telling you the same thing and you disregard them because you should be allowed to be the exception, that's entitlement. Don't be that guy. Do better. Okay, cool? Okay, cool.
Way too many people on Witchtok and spiritual TikTok are too busy virtue signaling to actually have a developed thought.
You have people who, I swear, their only thing that they do all day, they don't have a job, they don't have a life, it's just, that's cultural appropriation. Oh, I'm a good person, blah, 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 blah. And yeah, it might make you feel good. Like, I'm one of the good guys. Pat me on the back, give me a gold star. I'm good. I'm one of the good ones. But you don't show up when the people you claim to be uplifting ask for your help. You'll stand in front of them all day, every day, and be like, we have to make sure this is okay, blah, blah, blah. But where are you when you're actually called upon? Don't virtue signal. Do the work. Prove to people why you're one of the good ones. Side tangent. I'm a Norse pagan. People are often wary of me before they meet me. For real. They converse with me, they understand who I am as a person. It took a long time for me to make some of the friends that I have. because they were like, she's a Norse pagan, she is not safe. And that's totally valid. I can't be mad at that, because Norse pagans have a large white supremacy issue. And I could be outraged. I could be, well, I'm not one of the bad ones. Why? You can't lump us all into the same group. That doesn't help anyone. That doesn't prove to them that you are safe. And until you do that, you have given people no reason to trust you. You do the work, you show up when you are called upon, you talk on things that are important so you can use your platform to uplift other people's voices who need more traction. But talk is just talk. You need to do the work. Only then will people be like, you are okay. I have a lot of my friends that they're like, you are the only Norse pagan that I am friends with. And that's fine. That's totally okay. It doesn't make me mad. I'm just grateful that you're willing to have conversations with me. That's great. We can talk about things all day, every day. Share influences of our practices. If you come from a demographic that has intentionally harmed other people, it is a survival mechanism for them not to trust you until you give them a reason to. If you are willing to be taught, if you are willing to learn and listen and evolve, if you are willing to show up and do the work, you prove your worth. But until you do that, you cannot be outraged when people do not trust you, because you haven't given them a reason to. Again, step off my soapbox. Let's continue.
The terms white magic and black magic are rooted in racism. Same thing with using the term low magic to describe folk practices.
Exactly. Anyway.
Witchtok and spiritual talk have a really bad habit of pushing people of a certain culture out of conversations that are about their own culture.
This is what I mean by showing up when you are called upon. If your friends of a certain demographic, certain group, marginalized group especially, calls upon you saying, hey, can you make a video on this, kind of amplifying this message because it's important to me, or hey, this is really important to such and such, could you use your platform to help out, or I need you to show up to this rally because such and such. If you are called upon, that's great. But I've seen a lot of people who will stand in front of a group to talk about the plights of that group, and that's just disrespectful. That's entitled, that's arrogant, and it's rude. If you are asked to help, then help. But until then, uplift the voices of those who are speaking out already. It'll do you more good than anything.
Cycling through the same 5 debates on Witchtok every couple of months is fucking exhausting.
Every so often, something will resurface. And every time people either double down or they evolve, and that's great. It gets tiring. It's why I don't answer a lot of questions in my comments anymore, unless it's like a valid question or something interesting, like I'll do that. But when you're asked the same question 5,000 times, or the same video issues keep popping up of scare tactics, because it's always, oh my god, this is terrible, yeah. It's exhausting, and I frankly don't have the time for it. People who have lives and jobs and things going on don't have time for it.
For the love of God, find a new controversy. Having Christianized morals in your spiritual practice does not make you better than everyone else.
Honestly, some of y'all New Agers are just as bad as, like, the Bible thumpers, who are just spewing hate, and you can't do this, and you can't do that, and this is wrong, this is bad, you're bad for thinking it, you're bad for doing it. Let people live their life. We have only a certain amount of time. If they are not directly harming you, why does it matter?
We will talk about decolonizing our practices all day long, but when it comes to removing anti-Semitism from our practices, radio silence.
Norse talk, I'm looking at you. We have literal Nazis in our midst at times, and I've seen a lot of discourse. It's why I've left a lot of groups, both online and in real life, because I'm like, okay, cool, we're accepting and we're diverse and everything's great, but leave people alone. stand up for people who can't stand up for themselves. And again, because this has happened, I've had some of my friends call upon me and be like, hey, people won't listen to me because either they have a smaller platform than me or they aren't taken seriously for whatever reason. They're like, could you make a video explaining why this is fucked up? And I will get hate from within the Norse community. So they're like, it was just a fucking joke. It's not funny. It's not. We shouldn't be that people, but some of us are. And so we have to check and take accountability for them and punch Nazis because they don't deserve to live. Side tangent. Anyway. But let's finish up this last bit and call her a day.
Satanic panic does not exclusively exist outside of occult spaces. That is all.
The Satanic Temple is actually a great congregation, demographic, whatever word you would fit in there. And I have a feeling within the next, decade or two, we're gonna have a Satanic Temple funded hospital. Because they have been recognized as a legitimate religion. You can enroll just fine. You are given religious exemptions and religious rights for certain things, like the access to healthcare in the sense of birth control and abortions. Even if your job does not allow that in their insurance, you are still provided that by the Satanic Temple because of religious rights. And there are so many hospitals that are Christianity centered. There's nothing stopping the Satanic Temple from opening up hospitals wherever. And I look forward to that day because I've met a lot of Satanists and they're pretty cool people. Because Satanists are not, we worship the devil. Satanists worship themselves, understand their own power, and don't allow other people to infringe on their rights as a human being or walk all over them. And I think that's a great thing to exist as in this world. A lot of people are like, oh my god, Satan, eh. And a lot of that's from a religious trauma, and that's fine, but you need to work through that because if you want some good people, Satanists are pretty great. I've met a lot of them, especially at pagan conventions. 10 out of 10. We'll definitely have an intellectual conversation with you for several hours. No problem. It's great. But I digress. I'm gonna take my fancy dramatic sleeves with me and I'm gonna have a good rest of the day. But I hope you enjoyed this and I hope you see me on the next one. It's a day, guys. We're having fun and the sun's about to set. Skull, my friends.